Hey guys, it's Lee with Slayer Farms. Today we're talking about the end of 2023. And for some of you guys, you're going to be listening to this a couple weeks from now. I'm going to try to upload it today. It is literally the end of the year, and I just kind of wanted to talk about what has happened this year, just the different issues that we've had, the different things that we've dealt with, so on. And I just kind of want to give you guys that background. So to start with, 2023 started out like it always does, right? Everybody starts the new year. They're so excited. They're so ready to get things done. I have a list. I have a thing. I know exactly what I'm going to do. And we are no different than that. Every single year we start out, gung ho, ready to go. The end of the year, blues or, just exhaustion. Like today, it is the very last day of 2023 and I am freaking exhausted. And the very last thing that I want to do is create a podcast. The very last thing that I want to do is work on my blog. Really, the only thing that I want to do is sit here and crochet, but I'm not going to. I have work to do. But that being said, as soon as tomorrow hits, it's like you get this huge dopamine rush. You're like, it's the new year, new me, new this, new that. And it only carries you for so long. For us personally, specifically for me, I usually start losing steam about February with the whole new me, this is what we're going to do. Da, 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 da. Like, I usually will run out of steam about February. It doesn't take very long. And so any new habits that I am trying to employ in my life have to be created, and with that creation, they have to be sustainable, right? I can't just sit there and go, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and expect everything to be fine, because it's not going to be fine. So all of that being said, we are currently ending 2023. We're ending 2023 in an okay place. The greenhouse is mostly done. The gardens are put to bed for the year. Everything is kind of buttoned up at this point. But there's a lot of things that we learned in 2023 that were so very important. Number one is my mental health comes first. If I say that I'm not going, then that needs to be respected. And that comes with a lot of frustration on my part, because I want to do the things, I want to go here and see that person and do this and do that. And, and I learned in 2023 that it is okay for me to say no, thank you. And it's okay to not want to hang out with people. It's okay if I want to be alone. It's okay. And that was a very hard thing that I dealt with this year. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay. Because we're taught to push and push and push and push, and you just got to get through. You got to get through it. You got to be this person. You got to do this thing. You got to whatever. And it's okay if you're not. It's okay if the very last thing that you want to do is put on a smile and go entertain other people. It's okay. You don't have to. I am giving you permission that you don't have to put the smile on and go pretend to be okay. It's okay to not be okay. Like I tell my kids all the time, it is okay to be scared. It is okay to be nervous. It is not okay to quit. And I'm going to give you that same advice. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to not be okay, but it is not okay to quit. And whatever that looks like for you, this year, it looks like a I call it a work-related injury that sidelined me for about 6 weeks. And again, I'm calling it a work injury. It sidelined me for 6 weeks, and those are the best 6 weeks that I've had in several years, because I got to just be. There was no demands on my time. There were no demands on my body, my brain, my schedule, nothing. For 6 weeks, I did nothing. I did only the things that I wanted to do. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So that was number one thing that I learned in 2023, that it is okay to not be okay. And it is okay to take time for yourself. And it is okay, especially like in my situation, my kids are older. My kids are relatively self-sufficient. I say relatively because, I don't trust that. I do not trust them to go out of town, like me to go out of town without them, leave them at the house. But my kids have been raised very independent. And so I know that they can manage without me for a minute, for a hot minute, but it's still a minute. And so the second thing of 2023 that I want to touch on is the fact that I found so much peace in the garden. And I encourage you to go into the garden and look for peace. It's going to look different for everybody, whether that's weeding. You find your peace weeding, or you find your peace just sitting there. I encourage you to find sanctuary in the garden. And I've got a podcast coming up where I'll really go in depth into that and what happened and, how I found my peace in the garden. But I encourage you to at least look for peace in the garden. And how I found it, oddly enough, much to Jared's cringe, is I found it in my kitchen garden, and I found it in and amongst the raised beds. Now, Jared does not want raised bed gardens. He prefers row gardens. And we both learned a very valuable lesson this year. If you want mom in the garden, you better make it a raised bed, because I put my heart and soul into that raised bed garden. And that's the only garden that produced anything. Like I think we got 1 or 2 tomatoes out of the big garden that turned around and rotted on the windowsill. Because again, in the time frame of the summer garden, I was not in a good place mentally. And so the only place that I could go and feel comfortable in my own skin was the kitchen garden. And so that's where I went, and that's where I hung out. And so it got so much more of my attention because that's where I was. That's where I wanted to be at. And so poor Jared, I have since asked him to build me 16 4x20 raised beds in the big garden. And he's not thrilled, but he's thrilled because he knows that if we want this food, we want these gardens, then they need, and it sounds terrible, right? It sounds very conceited and entitled and all of those things, but just listen. He knows that if he wants me to plant those gardens and spend time in there and weed and do all of the things that need to be done, they need to be the way that I want them to be. And again, it sounds conceited. It sounds terrible when you lay it out there like that. But, I was talking to him last night. I was at work, and Jared and I have always called each other at 9 p.m. because for the older millennials out there, when did your cell phone minutes become free? 9 p.m. Until then, you had to pay by the minute, right? So that's what we did, is we would talk from 9 p.m. until one of our parents yelled at us to get off the phone. That's what we did. And to this day, 20 years later, we still, at 9 p.m., we stop what we're doing And if we're at work and we're on a call, obviously we can't do it at, but we stop what we're doing and we call that person. We call Jared, I call Jared, he calls me, and we chit chat for 10 minutes, 2 hours. Like, it just really depends on what's going on. Last night it was 2 hours. And we were talking about irrigation for the gardens and, how we wanted to do that because we've got IBC set up right now and I freaking hate them. We don't use them often enough and they collect a ton of water, which is great for the gardens, for the animals, whatever. Like, it's really amazing. But they're a freaking eyesore and I can't stand them. And then we live in Georgia and any standing water in Georgia is known, well, in the Southeast, but I'm in Georgia, is known for mosquitoes. So we had 4 huge IBCs of standing water that were filling with mosquitoes. And it was terrible. Like, it did not work the way that we needed them to work. And we did not use them the way that they were intended to be used. So it just created this huge ordeal. And so we were talking about that last night. And, I told him, I was like, the reason why the IBCs, one of the reasons why the IBCs stopped getting used was because it was such a pain in the ass to use them. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, the one IBC, the only way that you could use it is to pour, open the valve and slowly drain water from the IBC into a watering can and then go water with a watering can. I said, I'm going to tell you right now, I will stand out there for hours and hours and hours planting a garden in the middle of the July sun. I'll be out there planting. I have no problem doing that. But you want me to use a hose to water a garden? It ain't going to happen. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why that's the cutoff, right? Like, I don't know what it is about watering, but that water, in order for my garden to be watered, it either has to come from the sky or it has to be set on a timer because I will forget. And the only way that that is deviated from is if I look at a plant and go, oh, you look a little dry. You look a little, all right. And I'll touch, I'll move the mulch to the side, touch the soil, trying to, dig my fingers down into the soil. And if the soil is dry, then I'll kick on the sprinkler for 20 minutes while I walk away and go do something else. But I am not the type of person that finds pleasure in, standing there with the hose and watering the garden. Like, nope. But again, that's just how that's my limit. Because the flip side to that is that I will stand out there in the August sun or the July sun and heat and all that stuff, and I'll plant a garden with no problem. I'll spread mulch. I will spread mulch one friggin' shovelful at a time before I pull a blade of grass out of a bed or a weed out of the bed. It's mind boggling. Like, I don't understand why that is, but I'm like, oh, look, there's weeds. Let me mulch it instead of pulling the weeds. Now I will pull weeds, but I'm just like, oh, if there's weeds that are coming up out of the dirt, I may as well just throw some more mulch down. I don't understand why that is. I don't understand why that happens, but that's the way that my brain works. So yesterday we were talking through the garden and through, what we wanted to do and all of the things. And okay. So I don't know where I left off at, other than the child came down here and started asking me questions. So I had to pause it real quick. So I'm just going to kind of start wherever I feel like, because that sounds like, a good idea. So the second big issue that we had in 2023 was the garden. Like we discussed before, I love my raised bed gardens that are in the kitchen, raised beds that are in the kitchen garden. There we go. And we had row gardens in the big or rows in the big garden, and I absolutely hated them. And I don't enjoy being in the big garden. And so this year, in order to combat a lot of that, because if you want your garden to do well, you have to be in it. It's just the reality. If you don't want your garden to do well, maybe don't go in it because you're not going to spot problems. You're not going to see that there's things that are missing. You're not going to see that your tomato plants are stunted. You're not going to see any of that. And that's what was happening. So, the big issue with the garden, or the big garden in 2023, is being rectified by the facelift, and that's what we're calling it, of the big garden in 2024. So every year Jared gets to pick a month off, right? And because he is the primary builder of all of the projects, he gets to kind of decide what month that is. And this month it was December. He said, I got to finish the greenhouse. I got this, I got all this stuff I need to get done. So I'm just going to take December off. And I was like, all right, cool. Awesome. Sounds great. And so we sat down a couple of weeks ago now, and really fleshed out the facelift for the garden in 2024. And so what that kind of looks like is we're putting in, we're fencing in the whole, we're expanding. Okay, let me back this whole thing up, because I kind of scrolled out. I'm watching the cat sit outside, just looking at me, wanting to come in. And I'm like, I'm not getting up right now. Sorry, you're gonna have to wait a minute. But anyways, so to start, our original garden was 58 by 108. And we only planted the first third of it. And there was a couple reasons for that. The biggest was I ran out of steam. Again, I had that, and I'm calling it a work injury, that happened in May. And it bled over into June, and it bled over into July. And then I was just not mentally able to handle the garden. Now, I had planted the kitchen garden already. And so that's part of the reason why that one got taken care of so much better, was because I had already done it. But a lot of the issues that we had in the big garden were because I just couldn't get out there. And so, and because the garden it was a row garden, it wasn't the way I wanted it. There was a lot of other things going on. The chickens kept busting into the garden. The pigs kept busting into the garden. The goats would then get in the garden. It was just colossal clusterfuck is what it was. And so Jared and I sat down and really kind of pinpointed the problems that we were seeing in the last 2 year, the gardens from the last 2 years. And the first problem that we found in the big garden, the first year, was that the rows were too close together. It wasn't big enough, all of these, these issues. And the second year, the issue was that the garden was too big, that it didn't get planted. But because there was all these delicious nom-noms in there, the animals were getting into it. Well, we weren't having issues with the animals getting into the big garden the first year. What happened? What changed? What is going on? And so we discovered that the biggest weak point of the big garden was the gates, the front gates. The animals figured out how to push them open. Okay, well, there's problem number one. Problem number two is the chickens. We have clipped wings, and we have for the last 2 years, and it doesn't seem to matter. They are able to jump and grab onto the fencing and climb over. And so we started putting up electric fence, and then the solar charger died, and it was just this huge, big thing. And then I just gave up. And so the big garden just got scrapped pretty much this year. So the plan for next year is that we're going to reinforce all of the corners. We're going to reinforce the gates. We're going to, basically install the fence properly and start there. We've also gotten rid of the pigs, which was probably the biggest hurdle of making sure that the garden got done. And the other thing that we're doing is we're expanding. So we're not expanding the garden space at all. That garden space is still going to stay roughly that garden. Is it recording? There we go. That garden space is going to stay roughly 60 by 100. But what we're doing is on the left-hand side, and then the back of the garden, what we're going to do is we're going to install a chicken run. And what that's going to look like is mesh netting that's going to go over the top of that of a section. And so, okay, let me back up. I know I keep saying that. I'm sorry. I'm trying to concisely describe what is happening while also staring at the cat and trying to make sure the dog's not going to start barking and so the garden this year is going to be 80 by 120 130, and the garden space is going to be 60 by 100, right? So that leftover space is going to be the chicken run, right? And so what we're going to do is this, however much it is, roughly 20 feet surrounding the garden is going to be the chicken run. And what we're going to do is about 8 foot by 20 foot. We're going to net it off completely so that the chickens can't get out of it. And we're going to put them in there for, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it is. We'll see what the land can handle as we go. So, this particular section may only be for 1 day. This particular section may be for 3 days. Like, we'll kind of see what they're doing with it. And then as we move them through this huge, 130 foot stretch over here, and then, roughly 60 foot stretch over there, as we run them through, we're going to plant behind them pasture seed, right? So that's going to be stuff like clover, alfalfa, fescues, Bermudas, orchard grass, meadow grass, flowers, all these different things. We're just going to plant, throw down seed behind them, throw down some hay or throw down some, bark or something behind them so that it will start to grow. And we're just going to kind of keep moving them through until they're the whole way through it, right? And we're going to make sure that it has netting over the top and the sides so that they can't get out. Because again, that's the big issue that we've been having is they have figured out how to jump and climb and do all of these things. Well, then they turn around and they're teaching the other chickens how to do it, and that's creating a problem. So our hope is that by confining them into these 8 foot by 20 foot sections and then moving them through this huge space, they won't want to climb or try to figure out how to get out. They probably still will. That's my luck. I don't like chickens. So we have the new space. We have the chicken run. Then what we're going to end up doing is we're going to move, we're not moving anything. Down the left-hand side of the garden, we're going to have 2 foot by 20 foot beds. And now we trellis on cattle panels. And so a cattle panel is 16 feet. And so the beds will be 2 foot by 18 feet, not 20 feet, 2 foot by 18 foot. And it's going to have a cattle panel and T-posts straight into the ground. And that's going to be our quote in-ground garden. Now we have a ton of quartz and rock and other stuff on the property. We have a very rocky property. So what we're going to do is we're going to find all of those rocks and we're going to create these beds. And we're going to fill them with soil and, compost and hay and bedding and all this stuff. And we're going to fill each one of those areas with fresh soil. And we're going to plant them, the areas that are most drained of nutrients. We're going to plant things like legumes and clovers and stuff like that, try to help the soil. The areas that have better soil, we'll go ahead and plant things like zucchini or cucumbers or whatever. And And then on the right hand side is where we're going to have those 4-foot by 20-foot beds, and there's going to be 16 of them. And then smack in the middle of it is where Jared's going to build us. Like, I don't know if it's like a gazebo, but it doesn't have rails. So I don't like it's pretty much a platform with a roof is what it is. And that's where we're going to go be able to hang out and just sit and do whatever, because the big thing that I have found is the more seating that we have in the garden, the more likely we are to be in the garden. I can't tell you how many times Jared and I, and it's almost every single day, we go out into the kitchen garden this past summer. We'll go out in the kitchen garden, we'll sit there and drink a beer and chit chat and hang out. And the kids will come out and just chit chat with us and hang out. And y'all, I don't think you understand how much you miss that in your life until you realize that you haven't been doing it. Like, I can tell you right now, in the last 31 days, I think I have spent 4 days like talking to my children because it's Christmas. And so they're, catching up on their video games. They're, and they come down and they say hi, and then we kind of chit chat, and we cook dinner and we talk, and I'm talking one-on-one, talking for hours. I haven't done that with them since it's too cold to be outside. And that breaks my heart. Now we do, like I said, we do chit chat and we do talk, but it's more of a, while we're cooking dinner, while we're eating dinner, those types of things, where in the spring, summer, and early part of fall, we just hang out in the garden. Like, all of us, just chit chat. Well, the boys ask, would you rather questions. And I get involved in it because it's fun learning about people. And so, like, I'll sit there and I'll go, peppers or tomatoes. And it launches this huge debate about whether they prefer peppers or tomatoes, or sweet potatoes or potatoes, or Star Trek versus Star Wars. And you just shoot out, two things, and you give that person the opportunity to answer whatever it is that they want or that they like or whatever. And you get to know the person. And you may think you know your kids, but I promise you, they're going to pull something out of their ass and you're going to sit there and go, huh? Like, where did you get that from? Like, how does that even work? But that's normal because they're learning as they get older, what they like, what they don't like. Okay, I like this that day and I don't like it now. And, Chase, for years, you could not put lettuce on his tacos. But for some reason, now he wants lettuce on his tacos. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know when that happened, but it sounds great. Let's do it. But having those conversations with your family that you may not have otherwise is so cool. And so I personally can't wait for the summertime, because I can't wait to sit back in the sun and hang out with my kids, because it's just not something that we do in the winter. And there are a million reasons why, but they prefer when we're inside the house to be in their rooms. And that's okay. Like, that's fine. But come spring, summertime, man, they're out there hanging with me in the garden. They're helping me plant things. They're helping me weed. They're helping me mulch. They're doing all this stuff because they want to. And then wintertime comes, or as soon as we come in the house, they're upstairs in their rooms, or we sit down and eat dinner and then they go up in their rooms. So I'm hoping that changes when we get a couch and some recliners. Cause like right now we have a couch, but it is old and it is busted. And if you have specifically boys, or if you have very large dogs, and I have both, furniture doesn't last real long in our house. And like, we've had this couch for like six-ish years, and we got it used because Jared's like, I'm not spending money on a new couch. And I was like, I don't blame you. And so we have one couch for 4 of us, and we don't all fit on it. And so it's very much become a thing where it's easier to just go into your rooms and hang out. And so hopefully that will change when we get recliners and a couch and actually have a living room set. But that's on the docket for 2024. But as we wrap this up, this podcast is really just about the year end. 2023 was a hard year for us. There was a lot of unseen battles. There was a lot of seen battles, when the Japanese beetles came through and decimated my bean crop. The chickens came through and decimated my tomato crop. And then they turned around and they proceeded to decimate any seed I put in the ground, any plant I put in the ground. They ruined, like they ate it. And I'm not mad at them so much as I'm just like, well, fuck. Okay. So I stopped planting things because it was literally pointless. But I would love to hear, as you listen to this and as you find it on YouTube, whether it's the end of this year or maybe it's the end of a season, right? Where, you're coming out of summer and you're going into fall or you're going into spring, whatever. I would love to hear your quote year end or season end difficulties or triumphs or whatever is going on. I would love to hear about it. So make sure you leave comments. I love to read them. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit all that stuff so that you can stay up to date whenever we, come out with new podcasts. And I have to go yell at the child to get the chicken out of the garden. Hope you guys have a good day. See ya.